Forward then to independence. To independence now. Tomorrow, the United States of Africa.
April 15, 1958 was a typically hot and humid day in Accra, the capital of newly independent Ghana, as African leaders began streaming in for the first conference of the independent states of Africa that would lay the foundation for African unity.
The eyes of the world and all Africa are focused upon us and our deliberations at this time.
Only 8 African countries were independent at the time: Ghana, Liberia, Libya, Morocco, Egypt, Sudan, Tunisia, and Ethiopia. Thanks to their efforts, in a few short years, the ranks of independent African states would grow as much of French colonial Africa became free and independent. Independence would project on the world's stage a new core of African leaders that embodied the confidence of an independent continent.
Our guest of honor today, the President of Tanganyika, has played a role comparable to those distinguished Americans in the founding of his country.
And every time I think of the United States, I think also of the freedom of my people.
As more African countries gained their independence, there was a growing push for continental unity. But soon there were fissures. On the one hand, there was the Casablanca Group, led by Nkrumah of Ghana, Modibo Keïta of Mali, Ahmed Ben Bella of Algeria, Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, Sékou Touré of Guinea.
L'Organisation de l'Unité africaine a tenu une session spéciale.
They wanted immediate and total political unity in Africa. On the other hand, there was the Monrovia Group, led by William Tupman of Liberia, Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, Félix Houphouët-Boigny of la Côte d'Ivoire,
On préférait l'indépendance.
Léopold Sédar Senghor of Senegal, among others, who opted for a more gradual approach to unity. The differences between the two groups threatened to torpedo all hopes of fostering unity on the continent. Deft diplomacy by Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie would save the day. He invited the leaders of all 32 independent African states to Addis Ababa to hash out their differences. After several days of meeting, they will hammer out a charter giving birth to the Organization of African Unity, the OAU, on May 25, 1963, the largest regional organization the world has ever known. The OAU was not the total political union that Nkrumah and others had hoped for, but it was a good beginning, and the organization focused attention on what all in Africa agreed on: the total independence of the continent. Thanks to the work of the OAU, in a few years, much of the remaining 20 or so states in Africa still under colonial rule would become free. By the end of the 1970s, also as a result of the work of the OAU and the struggle of freedom fighters like Amilcar Cabral,
Un État se développe chez nous.
Agostinho Neto, and Samora Machel,
A luta continua.
Mozambique, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, and Angola would also be free.
The African Convention is gonna take place in
Now, the OAU could focus its efforts on the last bastion of resistance to true independence in Africa, the racist apartheid regime in South Africa. The organization had, in fact, for long given support to the struggle to free South Africa from white minority rule. A fake passport given to Nelson Mandela by the Ethiopian government under the assumed name of David Morsi Mai is typical of the support, small and large, that the OAU and its member states had given the freedom fighters in South Africa. Soon, however, as a result of the Rivonia trial, Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, and the entire leadership of the ANC would be in jail on Robben Island. Only Oliver Tambo of the ANC's leadership would be free but in exile. This letter he wrote to the OAU as it met for its second summit in Cairo in July 1964 speaks to the support the OAU had given the South African struggle. In a poignant line from the letter, Tambo noted that the second day of the conference, July 18, would be Mandela's 46th birthday, and he hoped the organization will on that day take a decisive action that will strike a blow to apartheid. It would take another 2 decades of struggle, but triumph would finally come in 1990 when Mandela was released. With his release and election in 1994 as president of South Africa, the OAU had finally achieved its goal of totally liberating the continent. And what a joyous occasion it was when he joined the summit meeting of the OAU shortly after his release, held in the very city where he was founded, Addis Ababa. It was also fitting, too, that it would be in South Africa that the OAU, having achieved its goal of freeing Africa, will transition to the African Union, the AU. With the second generation of African leaders now taking charge on the continent, the AU is focused on regional economic cooperation and integration as a tool for fostering political unity.
Africa being now free and united, we must think now about the development of Africa by the Africans. That was the vision of the founding fathers.
So whatever we may say, the OAU, together with the AU, has given us 50 years of great achievements. And it is proper, therefore, that we pause to pay tribute to those early leaders, 32 of them, who laid the foundation for the Africa we know today when they signed the charter of the OAU 50 years ago. Thanks to them and their work, each of us can proudly say,
I am an African. I owe my being to the hills and the valleys, the mountains and the glades, the rivers, the deserts, the trees, the flowers, the seas, and the ever-changing seasons that define the face of our native land. I know that none dare challenge me when I say I am an African. Today, it feels good to be an African.
As we celebrate 50 years of African unity and the dawn of a new age of optimism on the continent, each of us can proudly say, today it feels good to be an African. Long live African unity.